Welcome back, guys. It is thrift flip time, and in today's video we are going to be upcycling another magazine rack. Let's go ahead and get started. If you're new to my channel, then you might not have seen my older video about a little over a year ago. I had already flipped a magazine rack, but I'm just going to do a little different style one just to show you some more options. If you didn't see that video, I will link it in the description, but here are some pictures of the items that I made with that. I disassembled it and turned it into 4 different items. They were super cute and they were great sellers if you are someone with a booth. So you can check that out in the description below. And then without further ado, this is the magazine rack that we are going to be starting with today. I just went and picked this up from the thrift store and we're going to start by disassembling it. So this one did have several screws and it did take a little bit of muscle to get all of those pieces apart. So I just started in by removing all of the screws. I did have a little rubber mallet to help me pop any of those pieces that were just being a little stubborn apart. And then a good suggestion for anything with these type of spindles is to spin them before you try to pull, because spinning them will bust all of that old glue. And if that doesn't work, that's when we get the mallet out and we just beat that around in different directions until it breaks loose enough for us to pull that apart. From there, you can clean it up, but I'm going to go a little bit deeper into this. So I am going to be doing 3 different projects for you on this video today, even though there are so many more we could do. I already kind of have these picked out in my head because when I saw the shape of this, immediately I had 2 big ideas pop up. So I'm going to start out with one of the sides and I'm going to have a pencil and I'm going to draw out the shape that I'm going for. So for the one, I'm going to leave it as is. He's going to be a ghost. And for the second one, we're going to make a bell. So I'm just going to use a pencil and kind of sketch down where I want my cuts to be made, because I do want the bottom of this to look more like a bell shape, kind of like the sides and then the little ringer in the middle. So we're gonna, after we put that on there, we're gonna get a jigsaw out and we're going to cut along those edges very carefully, very slowly, and just with ease, and that will cut right through there with no problem. And then from there we can go ahead and start sanding. So I did end up making more cuts on some spindles, but we'll show that in a minute. I'm going to get out my sander here and I'm going to sand down both pieces. So what I want to do is just remove the sheen and the sealant or protector that they have on this piece. And so we just want to take that off. I'm going to do that on both the one that I did not cut and the one that I did cut. And then I'm going to use that sander and kind of round the edges of the area that I cut so that they aren't sharp and they're rounded and smooth and kind of blend in with the original piece. Once we're done with that, we can start cleaning up all of these pieces, and then I'm going to shellac both of these. Now I'm just going to use some spray shellac, and what I'm doing this for is because there is a really good chance that this wood will bleed or stain. So for instance, if I'm making a ghost and I want to paint it white, the paint will end up tinting to a brown or yellow just because of the age of the wood, and I want to make sure that I don't have that issue. So I'm going to go ahead and shellac both sides of this. I did multiple coats, maybe 2 to 3 thin coats on each side, and let it dry thoroughly before I started on my next project. Now I'm going to start in with the ghost. The ghost is super cute. I loved the shape of this magazine rack and I felt like it was perfect. Seems how we are in the midst of spooky season. So we're just going to start in with some white chalk paint and we're going to give this 2 coats on the front and back. And then the holes from the magazine rack that were on the back, I considered filling them in, but I kind of want the character and history of this piece to stay with it. So I'm not going to cover those up. I'm just going to paint inside them so that they still match. But if you flip it over, you can tell that this was made from something else. Once both coats are dry, we are going to go in and lightly sand the edges, because I do want to distress the edges a little bit just to have his shape pop a little bit more, and wipe that down. And then we're going to paint on his little face. I'm just using a little small detailed brush and some black chalk paint and painting on his face. I just drew on where I wanted it to be and then basically colored it in with the paint. I'm going to give him 2 little gleaming marks in his eye just to show where that light will hit, just to add a little bit more detail. And then we can move on to the sign. So I wanted him to be able to be holding a little sign that says boo. So I picked up some of the little pumpkin ornaments that you can find at the Dollar Tree, and we're going to paint those up. I'm going to be using the orange chalk paint in the color pumpkin, which is just perfect for this project. And I'm going to paint both sides. I just want to get a nice even coat over the entire thing and let it dry. And then I'm going to come back in and add some detail. So I'm just going to use my Waverly wax, antiquing wax. I'm going to paint a stem on each of them. And then I'm also going to use that to help tint and add shading and definition to the pumpkins. So I'm just going to use the antiquing wax to kind of add like the indents of the pumpkin. So I'm just going to add some lines and some shading. And then, I'm going to go back in with some white chalk paint and paint that on the edges and in between the brown lines that I just made. And I'm going to, while still wet, use that same orange pumpkin color and kind of blend it out to where we have a brighter orange color that would show more, you know, how the pumpkin's rounded and it has those ridges. So the bright part would be the part where it rounds out, and the darker part would be those seams where it's in. That's just going to add some dimension to it when it dries, just a little bit more detail to make it look a little more fun. After that has dried, I'm going to go back in with the color orange and do a thin coat over top of the entire thing. And then those colors that I put underneath are going to show through, but be a little less harsh and be a little more blended. And once that's dry, we're going to add our letters. So you can use, if you happen to have stamps, you can go on and print off the words and use carbon paper to trace it on, or you can use your Cricut. But if you're like me and you're just too lazy to get your Cricut out for this, you can just draw on your letters with a pencil and then again trace them and color them in with your paint. I'm just using that same black paint, and I'm just going to keep messing around with this until they look the way that I want them to. And once I have that done, I'm going to go ahead and trace them and outline them in white just to make them pop off that pumpkin a little bit more. When it's completely dry, you can erase any of the pencil marks that you may see. Test your eraser, make sure it's not one of those pesky ones that leaves like a weird mark whenever you try to erase something. So I'm gonna let those dry, and then we're going to attach those to our ghost. I'm using my STARBOND glue. It is amazing super glue with an accelerant spray. So what you do is you just put your glue on one side and then you spray the opposite piece once they adhere to each other. It's a very quick hold. So again, if you're like me and you used to do super glue with some hot glue, to hot glue for an instant hold, super glue for a long-term hold, this is the best of both worlds. It is a little bit more expensive, but I have done countless projects with it, and I still have more than half a bottle and the spray. So it's definitely worth the money. It is in my affiliate links below. I love it. It holds absolutely fantastic. I have had no issues with it bonding, and it bonds to many, many surfaces. So we're going to be using that to adhere these pumpkins to this ghost, and we're going to do that with a little piece of twine. I'm just going to use that. The little strings that come with the ornaments are not long enough, so we're going to use one that I have in my stash. We're going to cut it down, string it through the pumpkins, and as you can see, my stems are in different directions. I did that on purpose. And then I'm going to weave this through, and we're going to glue the pumpkin backs down when we get them lined up where we want them to be. And then we're also going to glue those ends of the twine straight to the ghost so it looks like he's holding it in his hands. From there, all that's left on this piece is to seal it up. I'm going to seal it up with my clear matte Rust-Oleum 2X spray, and it's good to go. If you wanted to add a hanger on there, you definitely could. You could just use a little piece of rope or wire. I want this to more sit like on a counter or a shelf, but I am obsessed with how he turned out. It was my vision from the moment I saw this magazine rack, so I'm very, very excited for how he turned out, and I would love to know what you guys think about him in the comments below. Next, we're going to be working on the bell that I am thinking more for like Christmas time. So we have our bell shape, you know, we cut it out, we sanded it down, we shellacked it, right? We're here, we're ready for the next step, and that is going to be to paint it white. I'm painting it white because I'm going to do it in metallic paint over top, and that white is just really going to let that color show through. So I'm going to paint it just one quick coat on each side, nice and even, and let it dry thoroughly, and then we're going to come back in with a metallic paint. I'm going to be using the color Aged Bronze. It's a deco art color that I happen to have in my stash, and we're going to do 2 coats on this bell, and just nice and even. The metallic paints do, leave more streaks like when you go one way versus another. So just be aware of that if that bothers you. Paint all in one direction. We're gonna let that first coat dry thoroughly and then go back in with the second coat. And then we're gonna come in with a stencil that I made with my Cricut. Now I will tell you, I typically would seal my project after I get it painted how I want it. I did not do that this time, and that was a mistake, but it turned out to be a happy little accident. So we'll continue and you'll see. So I just went into the Cricut Design Space, pulled a Jingle Bells logo, sized it, cut it out, and made a stencil out of Dollar Tree vinyl. If you don't know, Dollar Tree vinyl or contact paper make great material for stencils because they don't stick very hard, and they also cut really well. I do it on the washi tape setting, or washi sheet setting, sorry, so that it doesn't cut through the backing, but then it's a nice thin easy removable piece without having to waste the expensive stencil vinyl that Cricut sells. So that's my little hack that I tend to use for stenciling. So I'm going to make this up, get it laid out, press down. When you're stenciling, your first layer needs to be either some kind of clear, whether it's a Mod Podge, a like polyacrylic or anything like that, or the same color as your background. So I could have used that same metallic and done that first. That's going to catch any of your bleeding and give you nice crisp lines. So go ahead and I'm going to go in with some Mod Podge and paint that on first. That way, whenever it completely dries and there's any bleeding, it's clear, you will not be able to see it. And then I'm going to go back in with the color for my lettering. I am going to be using the white chalk paint for this. I really want it to pop off of there and match the handle that we're going to talk about in a minute. So I'm just going to go in and do 2 thin coats. I'm going to do the first coat nice and thin, getting in all the cracks and crevices. You can do that by spinning your brush. And then I'm going to let it dry thoroughly and then do that second coat. And after that second coat, we're going to peel that stencil back. I know if you're a crafter, you know this is where the mess up came. As I was peeling back, it started peeling my paint away that I had already painted down. And at first I was really upset because I thought I was going to have to sand the whole thing down and start over. But then I liked the texture that it left because this is, an aged bronze old bell. And I liked the difference that it was leaving. So I decided to just go back in with some paint and paint over it to see if I did, in fact, like that with the wood part covered back up. And I did. So what I did was I went back in and took some sticky parts and peeled up some paint. And then I also used my little weeding tool and I scratched paint off in different areas to kind of make it all match and have that like aged, like ripped look. What I'm going for here is like if you think of an old bell where it has like displacements of paint and chips and all of that. So that's what I went back in and did by hand on the places that were not peeled back. And then I just went back in and covered it up with that metallic paint to make sure it was all uniform and let it dry so that we could add the handle on. So the handle is going to come in from those spindles that came off of that magazine rack. And all I'm going to do here is kind of cut it down to the length that I want. I'm using my table saw to do this and the jigsaw to do this. So for the jigsaw part, I'm just going to figure out where I want to notch out. So we're going to take half of that spindle where it's going to lay flat on the bell to create a handle. We're going to take that out. So I just kind of drew that in with a pencil that I kind of knew where I wanted to do it. And then I'm going to use a jigsaw I'm going to hold that spindle, cut halfway in, and then I'm going to take it over to my table saw and cut the length of it. Now I did make a mistake and I forgot to drop my table saw, the actual blade down, so it did cut in way further than I wanted to. I filled that with some wood filler and it's just fine now. So now that that has been cut up, I'm going to clean it up and paint it with that white chalk paint. We're going to paint it up give it 2 good coats, and then I'm going to go ahead and use my sanding block and hit and distress that just a little bit to let some of that natural wood show back through. And then we're going to attach it to the bell. So you can see here I had cut off part of that bell to make sure it was nice and flat. And then I'm going to use my STARBOND glue again and attach the handle. So I'm just going to put the glue on the handle portion, spray the bell, adhere the two, trying to make sure it's nice and straight. There's not a lot of room for error since this does adhere pretty quickly. And then once that's on there, we're going to take it outside and go ahead and seal it. So I'm going to seal it with some Rust-Oleum 2X clear gloss because I don't want to take away the shimmery sheen of the metallic paint that I put on there. And then after that, we're also going to be using some brad nails to make sure that this handle is nice and attached and not going to go anywhere. So I got my nail gun out. I do have to use my air compressor with it. I don't have a battery operated one, so I didn't take video of this, but all I did was make sure my brad nails weren't going to be too long. And then I popped 2 of them in the back of through the bell into the front of the handle so that you cannot see them, but it is on there and I don't have to stress out about it ever coming off if it's bumped or anything like that. I considered putting some Christmas greenery on there, but I'm just going to leave it as is and let whoever wants to purchase this decorate it how they want to. But I am so excited how this turned out. I think it's beautiful. Again, let me know in the comments below what you think about it and let me know which one of the 2 is your favorite. Or when you see this shape, what do you see? What could you come up with? The third and final project that I'm going to do with you today, again, there's so many that we could do, is going to be some of the scrap wood pumpkins. I know you've seen these. They're made out of 2x4s where you just take different links, paint them up, put a stem on them, and you have a pumpkin. So and this is my version and take on that, and I'm going to be making it actually like a little pumpkin scene. So I have this little wood plaque from one of the wood piles. I don't know if it was from Michael's, Hobby Lobby, Walmart. I don't really know. I just know that you can get them. I am going to be using this as my base, and then I'm going to be putting 3 of the 2x4s on there to, again, make a little pumpkin scene. So I'm going to paint up each pumpkin with whatever color you choose. I'm going to be using orange, sage, and white. I'm going to start with each of them with a nice dry brush, and by this I mean I'm dipping my brush into paint, I'm dabbing off any excess, and I'm doing a rough brush all over the pumpkin. So I'm going to do that with each of my base colors. And then I'm going to come back in with that antiquing wax and do the same thing. I'm going to dip my brush, dab off any of the excess, and then do a rough brush all over, going in the same direction to make it horizontal lines, and then, no, vertical lines, to give more of like the pumpkin lines that you would see in a natural pumpkin. And then once I'm done with that and it's dried, I'm going to go back in again with just that plain color of each of the pumpkins and go back over top. And I'm doing this just to give these pumpkins a little bit of definition in the layering of the paint. Once that's done, it's time to attach them to the base. And for the base, I just stained it with some antiquing wax and let that dry. We're going to be placing these where they want to go with some glue to hold them in place. So I'm going to use my STARBOND glue again. Taught you how to use it. We're going to move forward. I'm just going to glue each of these, working my way back. I did dry fit, so I just set them down where I thought I wanted them to go. And then I went in and glued the first one, and I'm doing it 1 pumpkin at a time because I am going to put nails through the bottom to make sure that they are nice and secure and not going to just pop off. I did not feel like getting my brad nail gun out at this step, so I'm just going to use a hammer and nail, good old fashioned. I'm going to turn it upside down, put 2 nails through the bottom of each board, and then flip it back over, go to the next pumpkin. So I am starting with my smallest pumpkin so that when I turn it over, you know, if I had my longest one on there, I wouldn't be able to reach the table and I'd have to finagle it a little bit more. So start with the shortest pumpkin, flip it over, nail into the bottom so that it is nice and secure, flip it back over, place your next pumpkin, next height pumpkin, do it again, and then when you come to your tallest one, flip it over. Those other 2 are secure, they're not going to fall off, nail it in, and we have a pumpkin scene. Next, we just got to finish it out, and that's where these spindles come in. I took these spindles and I cut them down to different lengths and from different design points on the spindles. So I just picked where I would want the cut to be made, and I cut it with my table saw. You could use a jigsaw or even like a hand miter saw if you have one. Either way, you just want to cut down the spindles to whatever size that you want. And again, I use the different designs because, you know, there's different rings and links and things to make it all kind of fit and flow and match together, but not be the exact same. Once I did that, I did rub the ends on a sanding block to make sure that they're nice and smooth so that they adhered very well. And then I glued each of the stems to the top of one of the pumpkins. One of them, my cut, I had noticed was a little offset when I made it, but I left it because I thought that would look cute, and I'm really glad I did because it adds just a little bit of character to that middle pumpkin there. After that glue is set and dried and those are on there, we are going to decorate it with some moss that I picked up from the Dollar Tree. We're just going to be hot gluing that down all over the base and beside the stems of the pumpkin. Just again to give it a little more detail and a pop, and I love the colors with each other. And then I'm going to add just a little burlap bow to that second pumpkin just to add, like I said, a little more detail, a little more decor to it. But I am obsessed with how these pumpkins came out. I don't think I mentioned it. I did seal my pumpkins with some polyacrylic to seal the chalk paint in, because you do have to seal chalk paint, but you could spray adhesive, whatever clear coat you need to put on it. I love these pumpkins. I love the scene, and I love how the three of them work together. Again, let me know in the comments below what you think about it. There are so many different things you can do with spindles, especially these cute little mini ones. There's another project that I had saw that they took, they basically cut triangles and made the spindles the trunk. And I think I am probably going to try that sometime this season, just not for this video. But it is a super cute idea. I just saw it in one of my crafting groups that I'm a part of, and I thought that was a great idea. Obviously, they're really great for pumpkin stems. If you don't want to do the 2x4 pumpkins, you can do foam pumpkins and replace this fake stem with one of these. There's just a lot of ways you can incorporate. I know people use the spindles for like candle holders, and I saw people paint them up as little snowmen or make little keychains or wind chimes. There's just so many things that you can do so I'm just going to keep these in my stash, and as I need or want something, a handle, a ladder, whatever it may be, I have them all on hand. And I hope you really enjoyed this video. If you want more magazine rack upcycling content, again, check out my other video in the description below. But I really appreciate you being here. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Consider subscribing. Join us on our crafting journey. I'm going to take you guys in for a closer look, and I'll see you next time.